In the sterile clinic room, Mara lay back on the exam table. The technician inserted the upgrade device into her port. Mara's mind raced with questions. Had the forecast implant malfunctioned again? Choose your own path. Future Mara's voice echoed in her head. Mara came to, pinned down by Tobin Ash's weight. As he shouted, "Your perfect little life got blown to hell." "This isn't safe," Mara screamed as the train bore down. "We can't change what's coming," Future Mara said, her voice steady, before everything went black under the speeding train wheels. Like and subscribe for more stories like this one. The fluorescent lights in the clinic waiting room flickered as if reflecting Mara's own unease. She sat among strangers, all of them staring blankly at their laps or into space, while the air seemed to thicken with the anticipation of what was about to change. Mara's fingers drummed a pattern on her thigh. Her forecast implant had been upgraded from V7 to V9 only that morning, mandatory for anyone wanting to renew their audit contracts. But now, as she waited with this group of strangers, Mara felt an inexplicable dread. The clinic's public address crackled to life. "Welcome, patients. Please proceed to the designated upgrade rooms. Your forecast V9 implants will be administered shortly." Mara stood, joining the others in shuffling toward her fate. In the sterile room, she lay back on the exam table and allowed the technician to expose the port scar behind her left ear, a small, almost imperceptible bump where the implant connected directly to her brain. "Don't worry," the tech said with a reassuring smile. "This won't hurt a bit." Mara closed her eyes as anesthetic numbed the area. The technician inserted the upgrade device into her port, and Mara felt a sudden jolt of electricity, followed by a deep, pervasive calm. She opened her eyes to find everything in focus, every detail crystal clear, the world rendered in HD. It was as if her senses had been rebooted. The technician removed the device and patted Mara's shoulder. "All done. You're now running Forecastly 9. Remember, your optimal life path has changed. Please review your new probability curves at home." Mara sat up, feeling a bit dizzy but otherwise fine. She glanced around to see if anyone else noticed the sudden clarity of their surroundings, but everyone looked stunned and confused. As Mara walked out into the overcast day, she realized her mind was racing in ways it never had before, thoughts coming quicker than words could process them. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Back at home, Mara found Den waiting for her, arms open wide. "Welcome back," he exclaimed, planting a kiss on her forehead. "I've been worrying sick about you." Mara returned the embrace tentatively, still reeling from the upgrade's aftermath. She couldn't quite put into words what was happening inside her head, this feeling of being both hyper-alert and numb at the same time. "You look incredible," he said, his voice filled with pride and adoration. "Like you've been reborn." Mara smiled weakly, trying to relax into Den's reassurance. But even as she did so, her mind flashed forward to their future together, mapped out in neat probability curves. And suddenly, the sight of that future made Mara want to scream. Over the next few days, Mara struggled to reconcile her new mental clarity with the comforting predictability of their life together. Den sensed a change in her, but chalked it up to side effects from the forecast upgrade, an adjustment period that would eventually pass. In reality, Mara's mind was expanding like a balloon, straining against the constraints of the optimized path. One evening, as they watched the news in bed, Mara caught herself wondering about alternative futures for their neighbors on the screen. What if that family didn't have to relocate for work? What if that young couple could afford childcare instead of abandoning their dreams of starting a business? Quickly as it appeared, leaving Mara breathless and confused. Was this the beginning of something new, or merely a figment of her imagination, born from the turmoil in her mind? Either way, Mara knew she couldn't ignore it. She felt compelled to explore this strange new sensation, this desire for something beyond the safe, small life that had been mapped out for her. And as she drifted off to sleep, she found herself whispering a single word under her breath: deviation. Mara lay awake long after Den fell asleep, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm beside her. She stared at the dark ceiling, her mind racing with questions. Was she really seeing what she thought? Had the forecast implant malfunctioned again, allowing her to glimpse an alternative future? And if so, why now? Why this? She tried to rationalize it away as a side effect of the upgrade process or some kind of mass hysteria. But deep down, Mara knew better. She'd always felt disconnected from the perfectly calibrated life Proxy Mind had designed for her. Every day was a series of predetermined choices and actions that left no room for spontaneity or risk, just a never-ending cycle of small, safe decisions. But now she'd caught a glimpse of something more, something wilder, more beautiful, and dangerous. Mara shivered at the thought of it. The woman in her kitchen had been her future self, but one who was clearly not part of the original plan. And yet, there was an undeniable pull to this strange new version of herself. Over the next few days, Mara found herself acting out of character more and more often. She took a different route home from work, skipped social events with Den, and spent long stretches staring at her phone in silent contemplation. Each small deviation earned her a gentle nudge or reminder from Proxy Mind, urging her back toward the optimal path. But Mara resisted. She craved that flicker of the unknown, no matter how fleeting it was. And so she waited for the glitch to recur, for another glimpse into the unforecast future that lay beyond the safe confines of her designed life. Little did she know just how soon her wish would be granted. It happened on a rainy Tuesday morning as Mara stepped onto the crowded train platform. She was lost in thought, her eyes fixed on some distant point on the horizon, when out of the corner of her eye she saw it, a woman standing exactly where she'd been only moments before, but this time unmistakably herself, older and with a familiar, haunted look in her eyes. Mara gasped, her heart pounding as the train's doors whooshed open. She stumbled forward without thinking, pushing through the crush of bodies until she was standing directly across from future Mara, the two women separated by mere inches of glass and metal. Their gazes locked for a long moment, a silent exchange that felt more profound than any spoken words could convey. Then, with a jolt, the train lurched forward and Mara stumbled back, her hand reaching reflexively to touch the scar behind her left ear, the port where her forecast implant resided. Had it malfunctioned again? Was this another side effect of her growing dissatisfaction? Whatever the reason, one thing was clear: she couldn't ignore it. She had to know more. As she stepped off the train at her usual stop, Mara felt a strange sense of purpose settle over her. Whatever lay ahead, she knew this moment marked a turning point, a choice between continuing down the well-worn path laid out by Proxy Mind or venturing into the unknown, no matter how treacherous it might be. And so she made her way home in silence, future Mara's image still seared into her mind. She couldn't wait to see what would happen next. Mara stepped out of the elevator onto their floor, her hand still pressed against the port behind her ear as if willing the vision to return. But it didn't. The familiar drone of the forecast hum filled her thoughts again, and she felt a wave of disappointment wash over her. At home, Den was waiting for her in the living room, a warm smile on his face. "Hey, love, welcome back." He stood up and walked toward her, arms open, but Mara hesitated. "Den," she said, her voice measured, "I need to talk to you." His smile faltered for a moment before he regained his composure. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" They sat down together on the couch, but Mara couldn't shake the feeling that Den was already anticipating what she would say, that it was just part of their normal, comfortable conversation. "I had a strange dream," Mara began, trying to frame her words carefully. "I saw myself doing things that weren't part of my forecast." "Oh? What kind of things?" Den's expression softened. "I was standing in a studio with paint everywhere," she said, "and there was this fire. It seemed so real." "Fire? Was anyone hurt?" Den's brow furrowed slightly. "No, but—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I felt alive, Den. More alive than I've ever felt before. That's what scares me, that maybe my dream is trying to tell me something about who I really am." Den reached out and took her hand in his. "Mara, you are exactly who you're supposed to be," he said firmly. "The forecast knows best. We've been planning this life together for so long now. Don't let a strange dream undermine everything we have." But Mara's mind was already wandering back to the train platform and the woman she'd seen. Her possible future self, or just an anomaly of the forecast. The question nagged at her like a sore spot, refusing to heal. "I'll try," she said finally, feeling a twinge of guilt. Den had always been so supportive of their mapped-out life together, and it felt wrong to doubt him now. As they sat there in silence, Mara's thoughts drifted back to the train again, and suddenly, future Mara was standing beside her once more, not just an image this time, but as a tangible presence, with warmth radiating off her skin. Mara gasped, nearly jumping out of her seat. "What is it?" Den asked, alarmed by her sudden reaction. "Nothing," she lied, heart pounding in her chest. "I just thought I saw something." She glanced at future Mara, who was watching her with a soft, knowing smile. "Never mind." But the smile lingered in Mara's mind long after they left the apartment that evening, and she knew it wouldn't be so easily dismissed. The following days blurred together in a haze of normalcy. Audit reports to review, meetings to attend, evenings spent at home with Den. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. The sense of unease grew with each passing moment as Mara found herself drawn back to that train platform again and again in her thoughts, imagining what might have happened if she'd chosen differently. At night, lying awake beside Den, she would feel the sting of tears behind her eyes as future Mara's laughter echoed softly through her mind. She longed for the freedom to paint and dance and live on her own terms, to experience that unbridled joy that had felt so real in her dream. But what if it was just a dream? What if she really did belong with Den, living out the perfect life planned by Proxy Mind? "We don't have much time." And then, before Mara could respond, future Mara took her hand and led her toward the tracks, away from safety and certainty, into the unknown. Mara's fingers tightened around future Mara's hand as they stepped onto the train tracks. The rumble of the approaching train, now only a few minutes away, was almost deafening in the still morning air. "What are we doing?" Mara shouted over the noise, her heart pounding in her chest. "This isn't safe." "It never was," future Mara replied with a wry smile, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But it's where we're meant to be." The train, now just seconds away, roared louder and closer still. Mara could see the silver bullet of metal and glass barreling down the tracks toward them. She pulled on future Mara's hand in a desperate attempt to turn back, but her older self resisted, refusing to budge. "We can't change what's coming," future Mara said, her voice steady despite the fear etched across her face. "The future is already written." Mara's mind raced with panic and disbelief as she watched the train hurtle closer. She had always prided herself on living by the numbers, following the optimal path set out for her by Proxy Mind. And now, standing here at the precipice of certain death, she was forced to confront the terrifying reality that she had never truly been in control. The last thing Mara remembered before everything went black was future Mara's voice whispering softly in her ear, "Choose your own path." Mara came to with a groan, her head throbbing as if she'd been hit by a truck. She tried to sit up but was pinned down by an unfamiliar weight on top of her. Panic surged to her body, and she bucked violently against the pressure until the thing shifted and rolled away. Squinting in the dim light, Mara found herself on a narrow bed inside a dingy room that reeked of stale cigarettes and mold. She scrambled to her feet, her brain trying to piece together what happened. The train, future Mara, the voice whispering, "Choose your own path." The door slammed open and Tobin Ash stood before her, his wild brown hair framing a face twisted in concern. "Puck, girl, I told you never come here," he shouted, backing away as if she were contagious. "You're bleeding all over the fucking floor." Mara looked down at herself and saw blood staining her clothes from a deep gash on her left thigh. "What happened?" she croaked, every breath agony. "Your perfect little life got blown to hell," Tobin spat. "You were about to get port-wiped when Den's friends showed up with the compliance squad. That pretty boy wouldn't let you go voluntarily. He snatched a rag and began dabbing at her wound. "He thinks he saved your ass, but trust me, it was already gone." Mara tried to process this as Tobin continued talking over his shoulder. "Kessler's still out there, looking for any trace of the anomaly you become. Den will turn you in again as soon as he realizes what happened. You're safer here with me until we figure something else out." His hands moved deftly, applying a makeshift bandage that felt like it had been through the ringer itself. Mara's vision began to waver, and she staggered, her knee colliding painfully with a rickety table. Tobin caught her before she hit the floor, his eyes blazing with determination as he half-carried her to the bed. "Sleep, Mara," he said roughly, tucking her in under the filthy blankets. "Rest up, and let's get you looking less like a dead woman walking." As Mara slipped into unconsciousness, future Mara materialized beside her, her features softening with sympathy as she reached out to gently touch Mara's cheek. "Choose your own path," she whispered again, before fading into nothing more than an echo in the darkness. Mara's eyes fluttered open to a room that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of a heartbeat, but it was only the flickering glow from Tobin's makeshift generator in the corner. She lay still for a moment, her mind struggling to piece together the fractured images of the previous day. Den's face contorted with disappointment and rage. Kessler's relentless pursuit, Tobin's hands on hers as he guided her through the dingy tunnel network. "Mara," Tobin murmured, his voice low against her ear. "You're awake." She turned her head to look at him, taking in the sharp angles of his face illuminated by the dim light. His eyes, usually bright with mischief and defiance, seemed more guarded now, as if he was bracing himself for some inevitable setback. "You saved me," Mara said, her voice barely above a whisper. She reached up to touch the bandage on her forehead, wincing at the tenderness of the wound. Tobin snorted in disbelief. "Yeah, I did. And now you're going to pay me back by getting your shit together." "What does that even mean?" Mara raised an eyebrow. "It means," he said, his tone turning stern, "that you can't keep drifting on autopilot, living someone else's life according to a probability curve. You have to decide what you want and make it happen. No more letting the forecast or Den dictate your every move." The words stung, but Mara knew Tobin was right. She'd been sleepwalking through existence for far too long. "What if I don't know what I want?" she asked, her voice tinged with vulnerability. Tobin's expression softened, and he reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Then we figure it out together," he said quietly. "But you have to trust yourself for once, your instincts, your desires, the things that make you human." Mara nodded slowly, letting his words sink in. She thought back on the past few days, replaying the glimpses of future Mara's life and the ache she felt with each memory. There was a part of her that yearned to return to the comfortable predictability of her old existence, but another part, a part growing louder by the second, screamed for freedom, for chaos, for the wild unpredictability of an unforecasted future. "I think," Mara said slowly, "that I want to see more of this uncomputed life." Tobin's eyes lit up with excitement. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Let me show you what's possible when you embrace uncertainty." As Tobin began outlining his plan, hints of deregistration, black market neurohacking, and an underground art scene that thrived in the shadows, Mara felt her heart race with anticipation. It was reckless, dangerous, and exhilarating all at once. "You really believe," she asked, her voice trembling slightly, "that we can create a life like future Mara's?" Tobin grinned, his eyes gleaming with conviction. "We already have. We just need to let it unravel." Mara closed her eyes, the sound of Tobin's words echoing in her mind as she made her decision. It wasn't a choice between safety and happiness. It was about embracing life on her own terms, flaws and all. With that thought, she opened her eyes and looked at Tobin, ready to step into the unknown with him by her side. The uncomputed future stretched out before them like an open canvas, waiting for the bold strokes of their rebellion. "What's next?" Mara asked, a sense of determination settling in her chest. "Now," Tobin replied, his grin widening as he pulled out a small device from his pocket. "We hack the system. The device Tobin handed Mara felt surprisingly solid in her palm, a tangible rebellion against the intangible forecast that had governed her life until now. "This is your ticket out," he said, his words punctuated by the soft hum of the gadget. "Once you're deregistered, no more nudges, no more agents like Kessler breathing down our necks." Mara stared at it with a mix of fascination and trepidation. She knew what Tobin was offering. She had seen it in future Mara's life, the messy, brilliant chaos that came from defying probability curves. "What if I don't want to be deregistered?" Mara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The idea of losing the comfort of predictability still lingered, no matter how much she craved authenticity. Tobin's expression softened, and he reached out to gently touch her hand where it held the device. "Then we work within the system," he said. "We subvert the forecast without cutting ties altogether. We become anomalies that refuse to be contained." That notion resonated with Mara. The idea of living on her own terms while still maintaining a semblance of stability. It was like finding a middle ground between the comfort of Den's world and the wild possibility of future Mara's. Tobin must have seen something in her eyes, because he nodded encouragingly. "Exactly," he said. "We carve out our own branch of probability." As they talked, the implications began to sink in. Mara could live a life that was hers alone, one where she made choices based on what felt right for her, not just what maximized longevity and stability. The thought filled her with an overwhelming sense of potential, like standing at the edge of a precipice ready to leap into an unknown but promising future. "Let's do it," Mara said decisively, the words ringing in the dingy tunnel air. Tobin smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners, a look that made him seem older, wiser. "Then let's get started," he replied, reaching for her hand to guide her through the process of deregistration. Mara took a deep breath as she stood up, ready to embark on this new path with Tobin by her side. She could feel the weight of Den and Kessler and the forecast itself falling away, leaving only her, unencumbered, ready to write her own story. The uncertainty that had once frightened her now seemed exhilarating, a chance to create something real, something hers. As they made their way deeper into the tunnels, Mara's thoughts turned back to Den, to the life they planned together under the auspices of the forecast. She wondered what he would think if he knew she was giving it all up. The stability, the predictability, the love that had once felt so secure. "He'll never understand," Tobin said, as if reading her thoughts. Mara nodded, a pang of sadness and regret mixing with her excitement about this new chapter in her life. "I know," she replied quietly, "but I have to follow my own path now." The glow from Tobin's handheld lantern cast eerie shadows on the tunnel walls as they walked, each step bringing them closer to their goal, a future uncharted by probability curves and predictive advertisements, a life lived for Mara alone. After what felt like an eternity of winding through tunnels, they finally reached Tobin's hideout, a cramped makeshift studio filled with art supplies and electronics. He gestured for her to sit at his desk while he began assembling the tools he'd need for deregistration. As she waited, Mara gazed around the room, taking in the chaotic beauty that surrounded her. Paintings in various stages of completion, wires snaking across the floor, a half-assembled sculpture that seemed to defy gravity. It was so different from the sterile elegance of her tower apartment with Den, and yet it felt strangely familiar. Tobin glanced up at her, catching her staring. "I think you're going to like this," he said with a grin, as if sensing her fascination with his underground world. "It's not just about making art. It's about creating something real in a place that's always trying to control us." Mara nodded, feeling a sense of kinship with Tobin. They were both rebels against the system, seeking freedom and authenticity in a world that preferred predictability. As he worked on her deregistration, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held for them. Would they find each other again after this transformation, or would their paths diverge? Those questions could wait. For now, Mara had to focus on embracing this new reality with Tobin's help. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, preparing herself for the unknown that lay ahead. When she opened them again, Tobin was holding up a small cylindrical device, her ticket out of the forecast's grip. "This is it," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "Your chance to truly live on your own terms." Mara reached out and took the device from him, feeling its solid weight in her hand as she contemplated the future that awaited her. It was uncertain, yes, but also full of possibility, like a canvas waiting for bold brushstrokes. With Tobin's guidance, Mara began the process of deregistration, letting go of the safety net provided by the forecast. As they worked, she felt an exhilarating sense of liberation wash over her, as if she were shedding layers of restriction and expectation to reveal something raw and authentic beneath. The device beeped softly in her hand, signaling that her new identity was being created, one that wasn't bound by probability curves or predictive advertisements. Mara smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction at the thought of becoming an anomaly in the system. With Tobin's guidance, Mara completed the deregistration process. She felt a strange sensation as her forecast identity was erased, like shedding an old skin to reveal something new underneath. "What now?" she asked, looking around the dimly lit tunnel they were in. "Now," Tobin said with a grin, "we take control of your life." He handed Mara a small data pad with an encrypted login and password. "Here's what you need to know about living off-grid. The basics are covered here. How to avoid proxy mine surveillance, how to move around without being tracked, where to find black market goods and services." Mara scrolled through the information, her eyes widening at the sheer amount of data packed into this tiny device. "This is a lot," she admitted. "It's a lot for your brain to process right now. But you'll get used to it," Tobin said with understanding. "And I'm here if you need me." Mara looked up at him, feeling a rush of gratitude and something more, but quickly pushed those feelings aside. "Thanks," she said simply. "You already have," Tobin said with a smile. "You're taking control of your life. That's the greatest repayment anyone can make." Mara nodded, feeling a sense of resolve wash over her. She glanced down at the device in her hand, her ticket to freedom, and felt an overwhelming urge to embrace this new reality with all its uncertainty and possibility. Over her, it was time to embrace this new reality and see what lay ahead. Over the next few weeks, Mara settled into a new life. She learned how to navigate the tunnels, avoid proxy-mined agents, and find illegal goods and services that would have been unthinkable under her forecast identity. Tobin remained a constant presence in her life, offering guidance and support as she navigated this uncharted territory. But with each passing day, Mara felt a growing sense of restlessness. She had escaped the confines of her predicted path. But what now? What kind of life was she supposed to build for herself? It wasn't until one fateful evening, huddled in an abandoned warehouse surrounded by Tobin's makeshift art studio, that Mara found her answer. Tobin stood before a large canvas covered in layers of paint. He stepped back and examined his work critically, then nodded in satisfaction. "I think this is it," he said, turning to face Mara. "This is the final piece." Mara walked over to stand beside him, gazing at the vibrant colors that seemed to pulse with an inner energy. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. Raw, unbridled emotion lay bare on canvas. "What do you think?" Tobin asked, his eyes shining with excitement and anticipation. "It's beautiful," Mara said honestly, feeling a lump form in her throat as she took in the sheer power of this artwork. "But it's also dangerous. The system doesn't tolerate this kind of creativity," Mara explained. "It sees it as chaos, disorder, anything but optimal. That just means we have to be even more creative about how we share it with the world." Mara felt a spark ignite within her at his words. This was what she had been searching for. Something that spoke to her soul, something worth fighting for. "I'm in," she said decisively. And so began Mara's journey as an artist in the underground. Her canvases a reflection of the beauty and pain that came with living on one's own terms. It wasn't always easy, and Proximine continued its relentless pursuit of her. But Mara had never felt more alive. As she stood before her latest masterpiece, a fiery explosion of color that seemed to sing with defiance, Mara knew that she had made the right choice, no matter what lay ahead. For the first time in her life, she was truly living, and nothing could ever take that away from her again. Mara stepped back to admire the painting, her mind buzzing with possibilities. The colors danced across the canvas in bold strokes, a riotous celebration of life and defiance. She could almost feel the heat emanating from the fire that had inspired it. "What do you think?" Tobin asked, his voice full of anticipation. "It's incredible," Mara breathed, turning to face him. "You're truly a genius." "Thanks," Tobin said modestly. "But what really matters is how people react to it. Will they get it? Will they understand what we're trying to say?" Mara nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "They will," she assured him confidently, "because this isn't just art. It's a message, a declaration of freedom and creativity in the face of an oppressive system." Tobin's eyes lit up at her words. "Exactly, and that's why we have to share it with everyone. We can't let Proximine dictate what people see and experience." Mara knew he was right, but a part of her feared the consequences. The system would not take kindly to this kind of subversion, especially since she had already been flagged as an anomaly. "We need to be careful," Mara cautioned, her voice low and serious. "If they find out about our work here—" Tobin cut her off with a wave of his hand. "Don't worry. I've taken precautions. My equipment is encrypted, and I always use pseudonyms when uploading my art online." Mara nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing with fire. In the weeks that followed, Mara threw herself into Tobin's underground art movement. Together, they created provocative pieces that challenged the status quo and inspired others to think differently about their lives and futures. Slowly but surely, a small community began to form around them, people who craved authenticity and freedom above all else. One evening, as Mara was preparing for another clandestine meeting with Tobin, she received an unexpected message from Den. The words on the screen seemed cold and lifeless compared to the vibrant colors of her new world. "Mara, please come home. I've missed you." She hesitated, unsure how to respond. Part of her still yearned for the comfort and stability he offered, but another part rebelled against the very notion of going back. With a deep breath, she typed out a reply that would change everything. "Den, I can't come home. Not because I don't love you, but because I love myself too much now." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, her heart pounding in anticipation of his response. But it didn't come. Den had already blocked her. Mara felt a pang of sadness at the loss of their relationship, but it was overshadowed by a sense of exhilaration and purpose. She was finally living for herself, not just to fulfill someone else's idea of happiness. The next morning, she received a knock on the warehouse door. Tobin opened it cautiously, revealing a familiar figure in a sleek black suit, Sella Kessler, the Proximine compliance agent who had been hunting Mara since her anomaly was detected. "I've come for your friend," Kessler said smoothly. "Team 1 you've been uploading art to." Mara felt her heart sink as she realized that their subversive activities had finally been traced back to them. She glanced at Tobin, wondering what they should do next. But before either of them could respond, Kessler's gaze fell upon Mara's artwork, still drying on the easel in the corner of the room. Her expression darkened, and she took a step forward, her voice dripping with venom. "You think you can evade us by playing artist? It won't work, Maravel. We know who you are, an anomaly, a deviant, a threat to the stability we've worked so hard to achieve." Kessler's eyes flashed with determination as she pulled out a device from her pocket and aimed it at Mara. "It's time for remediation." The last thing Mara saw was Tobin lunging towards her, his face contorted in desperation, but then everything went black. When Mara came to, she found herself strapped down on an operating table, the harsh lights of a Proximine clinic blinding her. Den stood beside her, his eyes filled with tears and worry as he begged Kessler to spare her. "Mara, please come home," he pleaded again. "Come back to me." Mara's gaze drifted past him, settling on the chrome monocle that had become Kessler's trademark symbol of control. As she looked into its cold, unyielding surface, Mara knew what she had to do, no matter how terrifying it was. With a strength she never knew she possessed, Mara reached out and whispered her final defiance. "Neither was I." Mara's hand tightened around Tobin's as he expertly navigated the clinic's dimly lit corridors, Kessler's boots echoing behind them. The metallic scent of disinfectant filled Mara's nostrils, heightening her senses. She couldn't shake off the feeling that every step brought them closer to death. "What you gonna do with me?" Mara asked, her voice low and urgent. "We'll get you out of here. I've got a plan." Tobin glanced at her, his eyes full of unspoken hope. Mara's gut twisted into knots as they stopped in front of an unmarked door. Tobin turned to face Kessler, who stood like a statue, arms crossed and monocle glinting in the dim light. "Let's talk about this, Scylla," he said, his tone surprisingly calm given their dire situation. "Mara didn't come here willingly. She has the right to choose her own path." Kessler scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Her path? You call an unforecast life a path? It's chaos, Tobin. We're trying to save her from herself." Tobin shook his head, a hint of anger creeping into his words. "You're not saving anyone by wiping their identity clean. Mara has the capacity for free will. She just needs a chance to exercise it." Mara's heart raced as she watched Tobin stand up to Kessler, her mind racing with the implications of their argument. The debate about choice versus control echoed through her thoughts, and Mara realized that this was no mere philosophical discussion. It was a matter of life or death. Kessler sighed, seemingly exasperated by Tobin's defiance. "This isn't a democracy, Ash. We're dealing with an anomaly here. I have orders to rectify the situation." Tobin didn't back down. "And I have the law on my side. Mara has a right to exist as she is, unforecast and unpredictable." The standoff between them was palpable, the tension thick enough to choke Mara. She glanced at Den, who watched with a mix of fear and desperation etched on his face. He seemed torn between his loyalty to the system he believed in and the woman he loved. "Very well then, let's test this law you're so fond of." Kessler raised an eyebrow, clearly enjoying Tobin's resistance. "You think Mara has a right to exist? I'll show you what happens when we let chaos run amok." She stepped aside, revealing the door behind her. Tobin hesitated for a moment before pushing it open, revealing an operating room that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi horror film. The air was cold and sterile, the smell of antiseptic overpowering. "Mara," Den whispered urgently as she was led toward the table. "Please don't do this." Mara's gaze met his, filled with a deep sorrow and regret. She wanted to tell him it wasn't her choice, but she knew the words would fall on deaf ears. As she was strapped down onto the cold metal surface, Mara realized that this was it, the moment of truth. "Remediation begins now," Kessler announced, her voice cold and detached. Mara closed her eyes, bracing herself for the pain to come. But before Kessler could touch her skin, Mara's hand shot out, grasping Tobin's wrist tightly. "No," she said forcefully, "not until I tell you." "What do you mean?" Mara's eyes locked onto hers, filled with defiance and resolve. "I'm not going quietly into the night, Kessler. If you're gonna erase me, you'll have to pry every last shred of my identity from my cold, dead fingers." The clinic fell silent, the only sound Mara's ragged breathing as she faced her executioner. In that moment, Mara knew what she had to do, no matter how terrifying it was. With a strength she never knew she possessed, Mara reached out and whispered her final defiance. "Neither was I." The scalpel hovered above Mara's port, poised for its deadly strike. "Very well," Kessler said curtly. "State your terms." Mara swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew what was at stake. This could be her only chance to fight back against the system that had been controlling her life for so long. "I want Tobin here, now," Mara demanded, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "And I want a lawyer." Kessler's face twisted into a scowl, clearly displeased by this unexpected turn of events. But after a moment she nodded curtly and stepped away from the table to activate her comms device. "Tobin Ash," Kessler barked, her voice commanding as she dialed his number. A few tense moments later, Mara heard Tobin's voice crackle through the speaker. "This is Ash," he answered gruffly. "I have Maravel here at Proxy Mind headquarters," Kessler announced. She's refusing remediation until you arrive and provide legal counsel." There was a pause. Then Tobin let out a low whistle. "Great minds think alike, don't they? I'll be there in 10 minutes. Mara felt a surge of hope as she listened to the conversation unfold. Maybe this was her chance to take back control over her life. Kessler glared at Mara as if daring her to change her mind, but Mara refused to back down. She knew that every second counted. Proxymind wouldn't tolerate this defiance for long, and when Tobin arrived, she intended to seize the opportunity to fight back against the system once and for all. Within minutes, the door burst open and Tobin rushed in, a look of fierce determination on his face. He strode up to Kessler, who stood rigidly at attention beside the operating table. "Release her," he demanded, his voice firm. Kessler scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Not until she agrees to remediation." "Then I'll take my chances in court," Tobin retorted, his eyes flashing with defiance. "I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to defend my friend's rights against this illegal imprisonment." Mara watched the tense standoff between Kessler and Tobin with a mix of relief and apprehension. She knew that Proxymind would stop at nothing to protect its interests, but for the first time in her life, she felt empowered to resist. As they argued back and forth, Mara couldn't help but steal glances at Tobin, his unshaven face, his wild hair, his infectious grin. He was an outlaw, a renegade, a true believer in the power of chaos over control. And right now, he was her only hope. "Fine," Kessler spat finally, slamming the scalpel onto the metal tray beside Mara's head. "Take your precious friend and try to subvert our system all you want. But mark my words, we will find a way to eliminate every last anomaly like Mara Val." As she stormed out of the room, leaving Tobin and Mara alone once more, Mara couldn't help but shiver at Kessler's ominous threat. She knew that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, as she lay strapped down on the cold metal table, Mara felt a spark of defiance ignite within her chest. And she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on, with Tobin at her side and a fierce determination to forge her own path in this bleak new world. "Mara?" Tobin said softly, breaking into her thoughts as he leaned over the table to unfasten the restraints. "You okay?" Mara nodded, her voice shaking slightly as she replied, "Yeah, I think so." Tobin helped her sit up and handed her a blanket from an adjoining cabinet. As Mara wrapped herself in its warmth, Tobin's eyes met hers, filled with a fierce protectiveness and understanding. "Let's get out of here," he said quietly. "We've got a long road ahead, but I'm not going anywhere. Not as long as you need me." Mara smiled weakly at him, feeling a strange sense of comfort in his presence. She knew that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to imagine, but with Tobin by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they slipped out of the clinic and into the rain-soaked streets beyond, an unknown future stretching before them like a blank canvas waiting to be filled. And as they disappeared into the shadows, Mara couldn't help but wonder what masterpiece they might create together in this brave new world.